Hey, everybody. We're talking about something really near and dear to our hearts today. It's hard to get feedback from customers, just period, right? Especially for marketplace partners. And it's even harder when your app is embedded in someone else's app. And so today we're talking about a few ways that you can encourage your customers to open up, share their experiences with you, even when you're not standing in front of them. And there's a shout out I'd like to give to Thurston over at Dakotas today. He sent in this question about how do you get your customers to engage digitally. We all know that live events, it's a lot easier to get in front of your customers, talk to them and get great feedback. But how do you bridge that gap and get them to talk to you online? And with that, I'm Peter.
And I'm Kate.
And this is Marketplace Growth by Accoil. We all know it's hard to get customers to talk to us about our apps. Back in the ProForma days, Kate, we all tried a lot of different ways of engaging with customers. Not all of it worked. A lot of it didn't, if we're being honest. But we do have some ways today, tried and tested, that customers actually did start to engage with us. And I promise you, only one of them costs you any money, but even then, it's not much money. But before we go into the details of those things, Kate, let's talk about the principles that you approach this problem with.
It all comes back to assistance. It's a slow burn, not a quick fix. And the second thing is you actually need to have real focus and a practice around it, a process, because just doing a couple of emails isn't going to cut it. So this is all about being quite strategic how you did. And then the final thing is be authentic. Don't try and be super salesy. Be authentic. Trust, establish trust and walk in the shoes of your customers and your evaluators. And that will get you a million miles further than schlick snick stuff, in my experience.
Yeah, I think that's really important to just put yourself in their shoes. And part of what we'll get into, and that may be a good segue into the first thing that I had to talk about today was, first things first is don't be afraid to ask. And I think that's really where most of this starts. I think we've spoken to quite a number of people that don't want to engage or don't feel like it's an appropriate time to start those conversations. If there's a support ticket, whatever. I don't know, my personal feeling on this is that you need to ask. You need to be the one that opens up the conversation. And if you're doing it, there's all these sort of buzzwordy things that we're going to say today, I think. But, with empathy, putting yourself in their shoes, trying to understand really where they're coming from. I don't know about you, but I like it when people ask me about my problems. So I can talk about that all day. And that's just, I think the nature of all of us is that, if you're asking about me and what I'm trying to accomplish, then I'm more than happy to be involved in that conversation. And we found that, as a principle at ProForma, the more questions that we asked and the more open we were to hearing feedback, good or bad, the more customers we actually were able to talk to.
And we also, remember, we used to have a dynamic that we would deliberately introduce someone else into the conversation. So, for example, I'd be doing support at night and I would be teasing out, someone would just make an offhand reference to something. Oh, it'd be nice if you had that. And I'd go, can you tell me more? I know we've got to solve this bit, but can we talk a little bit more about that? And I said, I'm really interested in that. And then I used to actually refer it to, say, our product manager, Simon Hurd, would like to talk further about that. And so then we would literally open up the conversation around all of that stuff. And even though on one level you say, that seems to take quite a little bit of time and quite a bit of hassle, but it achieved two things. One, it has actually got a relationship to starting to build. But the second thing, it was a fabulous way of actually drilling and narrowing down on your use cases and really understanding your priorities of what was important for a customer. So you kind of got a double whammy for that one.
Yeah. And I think something that I always try to think about when talking about, in particular, being on support, is that support teammates, depending on the size of the team, if you have a big support team and dedicated support team, they probably have SLAs to hit, KPIs that they're trying to work towards. So they may not be the best ones. Your support teammates may not want to help you out with this so much because they have tickets to solve and they're trying to work through these things with more than one customer at a time. And that's where I think, bringing in product, bringing in sales, marketing, operations, anybody that can come in and help is really high impact because it kind of takes the pressure off the support team too, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's one thing.
Yeah.
that we did well was to say to the support crew, like, tap us on the shoulder, if any of these things come up, bring us in and we can take it on.
But to be fair, remember we also did pipe everything into a Slack channel. So everybody actually saw what customers said overnight. I mean, we piped our sales for visibility to everyone, evaluations to everybody, and also conversations all in separate. So I think there was something to that. And I just really want to actually be very clear on this. If you've got a hot situation, we're not talking about doing it then, or someone who's just annoyed the hell out of you. It's like, nah, of course not. Of course not. We're talking about people that are genuinely questioning things or genuinely trying to work something out, and they don't have a high level of frustration with you. Yeah.
I think to even go back a step further, how do you get customers to ask you those kind of questions? And that we did a lot of work trying to prompt people within the product through in-app messaging, did a lot of suggestion to them that support is here not just for problems, it's here for problem solving. It's helping you, the customer. If you have a question, it doesn't have to be a bug, doesn't have to be a huge issue. It's just, do you feel stuck? Contact us now and we'll help you work through it. That net us a lot of engagement from customers who didn't necessarily have anything to complain about. They were just wondering how we solve these problems. So I think it's like going that extra mile with them and persisting with customers, and they really appreciate that.
They do. And I think the second thing is it's about setting a culture. And as founders, we were very clear on that, particularly as we switched ourselves to 24. What were we? We're 24/5.
Yeah.
And then we're for urgent 24/7. So we're really clear. And so when we actually onboarded other players, we were really clear on the culture of how we wanted to communicate. And so I would read all the tickets every morning, and I would then come back and I would actually discuss with the individual support people about the approach. And so it's very much learning how to have an inquiry-based approach than just trying to pump everything through with short one-sentence answers. We had lots of guidance on that, and we had lots of questions to speed it up and lots of answers and common responses. But I think that's actually also important. You actually have to set a culture of that. And I appreciate that if you've got a large team, it's a different play, but it is still a play nevertheless.
Maybe a good segue from that is, we talked about earlier, was active features or publishing a roadmap or sharing your roadmap with customers as a way to engage with them. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. How did that work at ProForma, but also just generally, how can people implement that? And also talk about if there's a reluctance to doing that, why it's worth giving it a shot.
Well, I think first of all, it's like everything. You've kind of got to diagnose where you're at. So I was talking with a dev team yesterday and a product manager, and one of the things is they've made a very deliberate choice not to publish their roadmap anymore. And they did that for the very good reason is that they're always changing their minds. They literally were changing their minds. So they didn't want to do it because it would annoy the customers. We actually had long conversations as founders. We had long conversations around this because it can be a bit of a double-edged sword. But we decided that part of the trust signal for enterprise was that you were active and you're innovating and you weren't sitting in some garage somewhere doing something. So we kind of wanted to look bigger than we actually were. And so we made a very deliberate attempt on that, and people loved us for it. We used to actually write out a note every quarter, and our roadmap, and we had things we never delivered on, and we were always going, yep, we know people, we know. So it became a point of, yep, we're still going on that, and everything was based around, do not plan for this feature being in place. If you cannot use us as currently is, don't buy us. But if you can, this is where we are anticipating heading. And that in itself got us lots of conversations. And remember, Pete, the way we used to have regular catch-ups with our customers that really wanted to talk to us and our solution partners. Remember, we would literally put a team together and we would say, all right, we've got the PM on the call, me on the call. This is what we're working with. Remember we used to do that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
some big customers that
Yeah.
were watching and waiting for certain things to happen. Let's talk like practical steps on that. If you were to implement that today, like what's your advice to a company right now? It doesn't currently publish a roadmap. Would you go wide open? Would you pick and choose what you publish? I agree that it's a great way to get a conversation started, and it's also a great way to get people to pay attention and watch, as you can do on the marketplace. If you've got some exciting features coming, where should someone start today?
That's a really good question. I would probably dip my toe in. So if I was going the way if I was repeating what I did then and where we are now, I think I was a little bit naive in terms of how fast we could develop, because we did discover some roadblocks along the way. So I think what I would suggest if I was starting out is I think I would cherry pick and say, we're thinking of these ideas, what do you think? And I would probably cherry pick a little bit, but I think having some sort of conversation and some sort of bulletin out from your product manager is actually very powerful. So I would probably test the waters a little bit and maybe not go all in the way we did, but I would probably go middle of the road, I would think.
Yeah.
Does that answer the question, do you think?
It does, yeah. I think just practically speaking, you can have an internal roadmap and you can have a public roadmap, and the two don't have to be exactly the same.
No.
I think there's a company ethos that you can be 100% open. I don't think that's necessary. I like open companies, but there are things, especially when you're talking roadmap. If you think, what are the odds of us actually delivering this calendar year? Then why bother? It's just. I think you'll upset more people than you make happy doing that.
And so I think that's one of your decision points is expectations. What will be the level of expectations? How valued? And I know when we did a major overhaul, when we finally delivered it, like our customers were thrilled with what they could do. They were thrilled. And that wasn't big noting ourselves. I mean, we worked exceptionally hard getting feedback and trialing stuff and our sales, it just went, and conversations and all that sort of stuff.
That was all based on feature requests and customer conversations. So I think some of it was just intuitive. So far, what we've talked about is don't be afraid to ask, leverage support, tag team your members in when you can, and bring them around a customer. And I think customers feel really good about that. If they know that they're talking to the PM, or product owner, or as a reformed marketer myself, I guess no one really wanted to talk to me. And so I'd just be there where I put my support hat on in disguise and pretend like I wasn't taking messaging notes. Some of the other things that you can do, tactical stuff about how to get people engaged. I'll talk about one thing that we used at ProForma. And then what I'd like to do is talk about how all of this parlays into events and in-person stuff and how that then cycles back to the digital. I think I've talked about this on earlier videos, but what we did was we had giveaways, and I would use a website like Printify or Printful, take some ProForma logos, whack them on a t-shirt. I think tote bags were one of the biggest hits that we had, and socks of all things, but just offer up swag in return for conversations and put a time box around it. So we basically just in-app messaging would just say, hey, for the month of October, we're giving away t-shirts to anyone that books an appointment to talk to the product team. Or for the month of November, we're going to give away water bottles. And we didn't get droves of people coming through, but we had dozens of conversations on the back of that. And so this is the one thing I said before that would cost you a bit of money, but really if you use either one of those two platforms I mentioned, Printify or Printful, not very expensive, and the return that you get on that and the value that you get from those customer conversations was way more than the cost of a t-shirt. And I'll include links to those down below. Worth checking out. I highly recommend both of them. Just run little campaigns, just tease out to people, put a time box around it so that there's some urgency, or you can also use, I think we did it 1 month to say we're giving away 10 of some more expensive item, and we filled all 10 slots, and it just works, and people like having your swag, and the next thing you know, they're wearing it at events. So with that, we're going to segue to what's the full life cycle of this cape? Because we talked about, Thurston asked in his question, like live events, it's a bit easier. How do you bring that back to digital? So what's your thinking on how you leverage it in person to continue digital conversations?
So what we did was we viewed the events as very much critical opportunities for us. So we would do quite a lot of planning beforehand, and we would try to flesh out to see who was coming and who wasn't. And we would say we were off. Now, everyone does that, but I used to circle around and do one-on-one saying, looking at old support tickets and saying, you'd indicated that this was an issue for you. We are going to be at this event. Do you want to swing by the booth? And so we can get a couple of people to sit and chat to you about this, because we know this is really upsetting you, or this is a great opportunity, or we really like this idea. Can you tell us more? So we used to do that a lot. And I remember one particular one when I realised this was all starting to work was the booth. Remember, you were just starting, Pete, and we were absolutely swamped, or it was just after, and we were absolutely swamped.
Yeah.
We were absolutely swamped with people wanting to talk to us, and which was a wonderful thing. And then what we did was we always documented everybody who came to us, and we documented the sorts of conversations and the things that they were interested in, so that, again, it's taking it back digitally. So then I would actually write out to all of those people and talk about the conversations we had and the next steps in terms of what it meant for our business, and did they want to talk about that further, and could they sign up to our, newsletter or whatever it was. So for me, it was just this loop, and it was the best way, seeing someone face to face and then getting the digital relationship happening, and then you were able to get them to comment on things when you needed someone to comment. So then, because they'd commented and it wasn't us, then someone else commented because they admired that person. So it was just this circular loop.
And I remember conversations that came out of that event that led to some actual video testimonials that we got down the track. Having those conversations, and what you mentioned before about planning before you go to the event, I think team is such an underutilized opportunity for a lot of people, and I'm guilty of having done this for a long, long time, is that I would just show up and say, what's my plan? I'm just going to go and talk to people. That's what I'm going to do. But if you go in with a list of people that you want to talk to, and you do that, you warm them up before you go. I don't remember how many people you would meet with or Simon would meet with, but just the opportunity to bring a few people from the team around those conversations, you get a reputation for being open to those and having that chat and being approachable. And I think that starts a snowball effect where people realize that actually I can just ask Kate a question, or I can just ask them a question, and they'll put the right person on. And I know a lot of support teams do this. We'll bring in engineering, whomever, take it one step further and just make it as welcoming and available as possible. And that to me is where those in-person events really made the highest impact, was down the track. Those customers were more than willing to come back and talk to us because they felt like they could.
Oh, I loved meeting our customers. I just got so excited when they turned up, and some of them would turn up without us even knowing, and I'd be so excited going, oh, you're such and such.
That's a good point to make too on this, just before we close on that, is if you know who your champions are, and if you do have champions out there, those are the people to start with. I think if you want to make a short list of who's going to team and who should we talk to, it would be the people who contact you often, the people that chime in on your behalf on community. Just be watching for that. You don't have to bribe them with anything. Just say, can we chat with you? Can we buy you a coffee? Whatever it is, just something simple. And having those in-person meetings then bridges that gap back to digital, I think. And as I said before, we ended up getting some video testimonials from people who did exactly that. They met in person at team, and then it was just very easy to go back and say, how about we take this relationship further? Okay.
And I've got a question for you. This is going to be a challenging one. So, things have moved on, and the marketplace is a lot noisier, and everybody's starting to do similar things. Everyone's asking for feedback. Everyone wants a survey, blah, 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 blah. What are your thoughts on that? How to be different?
That is a tough one. I think a lot of it comes down to just having a bit of fun with it, being a bit creative. Yeah. One thing that comes up often in conversations, I think, is how do we cross promote? How do we do co-marketing? And a lot of it is focused around Atlassian, but I think marketplace partners have a lot of opportunity to work with each other. So if you've got friends in the space, complementary apps, something like that, what can you team up and do? I think the Atlassian ecosystem revolves around team, really, like the big event. So I would be planning something for that, but start talking about it the day after the last team, really. What are we going to do next year? And I think just getting creative with things.
Yeah.
We've got some campaigns in the works right now that I'm pretty excited to launch, that they're a bit different, made to make a bit of noise. And just try to think of fun ways that you can make a bit of noise. And I mean, if you look around the marketplace, there are a few companies that I'm sure everyone can imagine who I'm talking about when you say rap video. Good at making noise, good at building the business. I think trying to have a bit of fun is just where I would start with that.
And I think also being human, because, and again, maybe that's just because I'm a little bit older and saying that, and I'm not meaning that tritely, is that it's the number of times people said to us, oh my goodness, we got the impression that you cared, that you weren't actually just a transaction.
Yeah.
And we did care because we weren't a huge machine, but we were building up to be a bigger one. And it does get harder as you scale, but it's that essence of that you care and that you want them to do well. You want their business to flourish, because if they flourish, you'll flourish. It's as simple as that.
And really, it's a small world out there, everybody.
Well, you never know who they move on to.
Yeah, they move on to, and they talk, and the reputation that you build just compounds. So yeah, you get one customer talking to you. If they have a good experience, it just kind of goes from there. So I think that's what I would underscore on all this. Yeah, be real, be human, be empathetic, and it will work. And as you said at the top, Kate, persistence, and build a process around it. Make it easy to do it, as easy as possible.
And I'm not trying to be, again, trite here, but, sometimes we did stuff and we were talking to crickets, we're talking to ourselves. Terribly disappointing. All enthusiastic, going, we're on to something here, and then you got nothing. I was like, And you just have to try again. And so that's what it is. So, Thurston, hopefully we've answered your question, Hopefully we've given you some ideas. It sounds like a lot of work, and it kind of is, but once you actually get in the role of it, it's actually not, because it actually all starts to feed each other.
I agree. Yeah. So it is really bringing both together. And I think that's really, really true in this Atlassian space, where it is a lot of relationships that then go both ways. The people you meet online, meet them in real life, and vice versa, and that will get the conversations going. We've covered a number of ways today. I think we went longer than we intended to here, Kate, but some of the things that we talked about, using support, bring your team in around this. I guess it's kind of like a rally around the customer on support, and encourage your customers to contact you with any questions that they have about your product, or I guess even Atlassian products. Roadmaps, think about that, sharing those and getting customers engaged that way. Offering swag, that's a big one. I'm a fan of that. And plan to talk to people in person and bring that back online. Is there anything else I missed there in the recap, Kate?
I think you've got it all. And again, we recognise about support, and we're always banging on about support, but it really is a great mechanism if you use it in the right way.
I think so too. All right, everybody, if you got value out of this video and you like what we're doing here, we are here to help marketplace partners. So if this is valuable content for you, please hit that subscribe button. We do this every single week. We'll be here releasing more of these videos. If there's anything that you want us to talk about, if any questions that you have just burning in your head about, how do we make this marketplace thing work, please put them in the comments below, or you're welcome to hop over to LinkedIn and DM Kate or myself. We're both on there. Happy to chat and would love to hear from you with your questions. Until next time, everybody, thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, guys. Talk soon.